Good morning. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor from somewhat drizzly and rainy, but still 65 degrees, New Orleans, Louisiana. And as always, I'm joined by Rocky Messing from Tel Aviv. What's the temperature over there, Rocky? Do we want to know?
Today's weather report brings us a gorgeous 75 degrees.
Oh,
with, not a cloud in the sky. So,
okay. I'm sorry I asked. We are very happy today to be joined by an old friend of mine, a longtime colleague as well, George Socha, who, of course, many of you know as the founder and moving force behind the EDRM. But he's now so is
more than that.
But yes, exactly. And we'll get to the pizza later. George is now, correct me if I get this wrong, George, you're the Senior VP of Brand Awareness at Reveal. Is that correct?
That's correct. And if you can tell me what that means, you get a prize and you educate me all at the same time.
Ooh, look at that.
Well, there goes our first question out the window. Right?
Yeah. You can bring back the question. I can give you a better answer.
Well, we usually start off by asking about your background. How did you get involved in this crazy business? I, of course, because I've known you so long, you probably recall, you and I met through our dear friend, Jim Kane, who's no longer with us. And he introduced, I recall, and you know, this is, you know, yes, I remember it well. I believe it was at Legal Tech West at the old Century Plaza in Century City, where Jim introduced us. And I believe you were still, I'm sure you were still with the law firm at the time. This is as if I might paraphrase Jimmy Buffett, it wasn't pre-you, it was pre-EDRM.
It was pretty much pre-discovery too.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So that kind of segues into.
I think I met George, which George, I'm sure you don't remember because I was, you know, a new, no nothing. Yeah, who cares? But we actually met, I think, in 2005 or so at Legal Tech, something like that.
And you were what, a content analyst at the time, perhaps?
No, I was at Merrill.
I think it was a high school.
No, it's
high school senior
yeah.
at the time.
I think it might have actually been I was at RLS at the time.
Okay.
So either RLS or right about to switch over to Discover Ready, one of those. But like it was right at the yeah. We met. We had you were great. Gave me 10 minutes of talking about all this e-discovery stuff. It was awesome. So thank you for that. But, but let's go back in time. Let's go back in time even a little bit more, I think.
Well, how far back do you want to go?
Yeah.
Let's go all the way. Why in the world law? Let's start with that.
Okay, you want to go all the way back? We go to 1972, January of 1972. I went to a small college preparatory, coeducational, non-denominational high school in Wisconsin, a little bit north of Madison, Wayland Academy. And they had a 414 program. So 4 months regular courses, 1 month of short courses or create your own activity in January, and then 4 months of regular courses or whatever the months were. And that January, I signed up for 2 short courses, one in astronomy. I never really went anywhere with that. The other in computer programming. So that was my introduction to computers. And I studied basic programming for a month. We had a PDP E11.
Wow.
Almost no one watching this will ever have heard of that. And we didn't have the whole thing. We just had a dummy terminal remote connection. If you want to see what they're like, you can actually look one up on YouTube. For me, it's kind of entertaining. One of my brothers did that recently and pointed it out to me. I'd forgotten how noisy those machines were, but it was a freestanding terminal on this formed folded metal stand. to write a program. To run a program, first you wrote it out longhand. You took a long sheet of paper and wrote it out. Then you typed it in to the terminal. There was no video terminal. As you typed, two things would happen. The characters, and just like a typewriter typing, no fancy anything.
Right.
The type, you type, and there was this huge spool of yellow paper, and it would type it onto that. And once you got done typing all of that, you'd tear it off and save that paper. It was extremely important. Second, it would punch holes in a strip of paper that was maybe 1.25 inches wide. And that could accommodate 9 holes per row. That was your actual program. The program wasn't saved anywhere. The program was what was on that strip of tape. Once you type the whole thing in, you'd tear off that piece of yellow, the yellow strip, and feed that back into the machine. Then one of two things would happen. Your program would run, or your program would not run.
Right.
And if it ran, you'd go, phew, because if it didn't run, that long printout you had, you would take that and a pencil, not a pen, but a pencil, and you would debug the program. Debugging the program meant that you would manually work through the program line by line, routine by routine, subroutine by subroutine, until you found the thing that was wrong. And then you'd start all over. What I don't remember is whether it's somewhere cached enough so that you could edit what you typed in, or whether you had to type everything in again. I just don't remember that. That machine was my playground for 4 years in high school. The next January, I took my second and last computer programming course. As I remember, advanced basic and the beginnings of Pascal, but the Pascal didn't take. That was the beginning and the end of my formal education when it comes to computers.
Okay.
But that's what got me started. All through high school, there were a group of us who wrote just inane little programs, or sometimes very big and complex programs, to try to run on the machine. When I should have been doing much more useful things, perhaps, in high school, that's what I was doing. That's where it all began, if you want to go back to the beginning.
Okay. So that shows your love of technology. You obviously had the bug. And then where did you go for undergrad?
Well, I went to Madison, University of Wisconsin, Madison, majored in poli-sci. It was really, if anything, a philosophy degree. I didn't come within, I don't know, I know I walked past buildings that contained computers. That was as much contact as I had with computers there. From that, I went to West Africa for just about 2.5 years as a Peace Corps volunteer. No electricity, no running water, certainly no computers. It was, however, the most valuable experience of my life, that time as a Peace Corps volunteer. Coming back from West Africa, I did a little 4-month layover in Europe, bought a bicycle in Paris, flipped a coin, and ended up heading west. And I had those old American Express travelers checks. And I had some money set aside, and I was going to keep going until either I got tired of traveling or ran out of money. Well, I got tired of traveling early September. 4 months, about 4,500 or whatever it was miles on the bicycle. Partway through, I did this roundabout loop from Paris to London via Venice. So partway through, I stopped over in Austria, where my middle brother, who was at that time a graduate student at Cornell in physics.
Hey, I just want to interrupt for a second. I'm no geographer, but I don't seem to think that Venice is west of Paris.
No, it's not. I made this big loop. I headed west out to Brittany, down the coast of France, across the southern part of France, through the Côte d'Azur, across the mountains in Italy, the longest 10-hour bicycle ride I've ever done across those mountains.
Yeah.
Venice and back up and so on. So I kind of wandered around. It was 4 months after all.
That's awesome.
And my middle brother was in Austria writing a book called Inside the IBM PC. Rather ironically, he was writing it on a Compaq portable computer, which was essentially a computer in a suitcase, big heavy suitcase. You unclipped one end of it, folded it down, and that was the keyboard. It had a tiny little screen.
Right.
And it was I forget, like an amber, and it was green instead of amber, or amber instead of green. And that was part of what distinguished it from an IBM PC.
I think it was
Anyway,
amber. I think it was that. Yeah.
I looked at that machine and I thought, the world has changed while I was gone. I got to figure out what this is all about. So I finished my bike ride, ended up back in the US. My father, who ran a microscope repair business, had recently bought a PC or two. I wrote a inventory control system on his PC for his business. Applied to a bunch of law schools. It was either law school or international agricultural economics, which I know is a common choice people make.
Yeah, well, but why law? Like, what was it about law that you decided, hey, this is where one of my two choices? I mean,
well, there were several things. One is I was drawn by the what I saw as the intellectual challenge of the practice of law.
Okay.
And I think appropriately so. That I got right. I thought I probably wanted to be a trial lawyer. The number of cases I've tried, I cannot ever legitimately call myself a trial lawyer. But the longest trial I worked on was 4 months. But I wasn't one of the attorneys with witnesses on the stand on that. I was getting the witnesses ready, digging up a lot of data, going through electronic data and all of that. So I never really made it to trial lawyer status. Part of it was that I looked at the life I would have lived in international agricultural economics, and that would have, at least with the path I saw, meant that I would have moved from country to country every 3 years. And I had enough self-awareness to realize not a good idea, not a good lifestyle for the likes of me. And then finally, friends and family all were constantly urging me to go to law school. So I thought, okay. I did, however, do some homework. I interviewed, I think, about 30 lawyers across a spectrum of types and sizes of practices to get an idea of what they really did, what their work lives were like, what challenges they faced, and what they enjoyed about their jobs. Kind of like doing a survey. Imagine that. And then looked at that and thought, yeah, I think this could work. I could do this. Yeah. Applied to a bunch of law schools on the theory that someone's maybe going to say yes to me, and I'm only going to do this one time. And if they all say no, it's economics for me. Instead, the last one I applied to, I wrote a program to fill out my law school applications for me.
Yeah.
Just because why not? Rather than typing them in by hand, I was using WordStar, and I wrote a program on WordStar to fill in the applications. And it had a whole bunch of instructions, if this, then that, and so on. When I got to Cornell, it was the last of, I don't know what, I applied to 14 schools or some ridiculous number in those days. I said, oh, forget this. And I hand typed in the application, see attached, see attached, see attached, and then it was a file dump.
Okay.
It was a data dump on the law school. They did ask one question that no other school asked, which was basically, I don't remember the exact wording of their question or of my answer, but it was basically, what are you going to do for the good of the world with your law degree? And I had the ignorance, the arrogance, and the chutzpah to say that I was going to teach lawyers to become better lawyers and be able to improve their practice of law through the more effective use of technology.
Okay.
Showed up at law school. There's no technology at law school in 1985 or 4, whatever year it was I showed up. And Cornell, which is where I went. It's a great law school. I loved the location. Very academic in its orientation, not surprisingly. I had just come back from 2 years of being 2.5 years of being a chicken farmer in West Africa. I wanted something
Right.
very concrete and hands-on. So at the first possible opportunity, I got involved in the legal aid clinic, which was I spent more time in the legal aid clinic my second and third year than in all my other classes and activities put together. Cornell long has had a strong connection with IBM. Someone at IBM donated a half dozen PCs to the law school, saying, we don't know what lawyers could possibly do or law schools could possibly do with computers, but here you go. The dean, who was at the time Peter Martin, you might know that name because Peter Martin, along with, and I keep forgetting whether it's Bruce Thomas or Thomas Bruce, who I didn't know, but Dean Martin I definitely did know. They went on to co-found the Legal Information Institute, or LII, at Cornell, which is itself a wonderful resource. But at that time, the dean looked at these computers and said, we have no place for these in the classroom. He turned to the head of the legal aid clinic, said, maybe you can use those. The head of the legal aid clinic knew I had a computer. I had bought a Macintosh. So I'm going out of chronological order here, but January of 1983, that was the introduction of the Macintosh. I was in Seattle for the Seattle unveiling. The next day, I went to the Seattle University bookstore and bought a Macintosh with money borrowed from my mother. So I took that to law school. The dean knew or the head of the legal aid clinic knew I had that. He turned to me and said, maybe you can figure out what to do. I wrote a sneakerware, because at that time there was no way to
Transfer between, yep.
Yeah, there were no wires to connect PCs yet. I wrote a sneakerware.
Well, why didn't you just hook it up to the Wi-Fi?
Yeah, I don't know. I lost the password.
That was it. Yeah.
Wrote a matter management system for the legal aid clinic, which we used for at least the rest of my time there. So all the students used it to manage their matters.
Cool.
My third year, my senior project was to create a mock-up of an expert system for people to navigate the New York State social services. It was a mock-up. I didn't actually build the expert system, but I built a mock-up of it. Came out of law school, went to a firm in Minnesota. I showed up and they handed me a dictaphone and said, see how technologically advanced we are. We've got this great little piece of equipment. And I thought, what have I done now?
Right.
In short order, I brought my Mac into the office, and a steady stream of senior associates and junior partners came into my office one after the other, not all on the same day, shut the door, sat down, and all delivered essentially the same message. Lose the computer. Real attorneys do not type. No one will ever take you seriously as a lawyer. You will only be a glorified secretary if you have a computer on your desk.
Now, what year was this, George?
1987.
Browning told me the same story about his first computer at Gray Carey, the original.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't lose the computer, it's still on the uptake. And in part as a result, several things happened. One is that there was an IT department. I got to know those folks pretty well because I kept trotting down saying, well, you got anything I can use? And I did end up with a PC as well. Before I got the PC, though, the firm landed what would be the largest set of cases it would ever happen. The firm, when I was a summer associate, had 85 attorneys. It collapsed in 1996. At that point, I think it had about 250 attorneys. Over an 18-month period, it went from that to nearly zero attorneys. Had that firm been located on either coast, the collapse would have made national news. We were in Minnesota. Folks on the coast didn't notice this little collapse. But we landed the largest set of cases we would ever have. There were going to be 1 million documents. And Tom, you remember, it was the era of the mythical million. People
Yeah.
all the time said they were going to have 1 million documents, and 1 million quickly got whittled down to 10,000.
Right.
That just meant
Which
like
is
20
still huge.
boxes. Right?
Yeah.
Right, which is still huge.
This
Yeah.
really was 1 million documents.
Yeah.
And one of the partners at the firm I was at, Mark Whitehead, was very active in the ABA. Through the ABA, he knew Jim Kane, whom you, Tom, knew very well. Mark brought Jim on as a consultant. Jim got assigned to me, or me to him. I don't know how you would look at it. And I didn't know the first thing about automated litigation support. I'd already gotten drowned, not just wet, but drowned with the paper side of things. Thank God for paralegals. But for them, I would have had no clue what to do. They basically, the first warehouse we went to, they basically sat me down in the corner and they said, shut up, don't do anything because there's nothing useful you can do. Just watch us for a few days. And then we'll start training you in so you can figure out what to do.
Nice.
Yeah. So without them, I'd have been toast. But Jim essentially did the same thing then when it came to automated litigation support, because I didn't know the first thing about that. Jim was one of the first, if not the first, automated litigation support consultant. He literally wrote the book on the topic and taught me an incredible amount of very wide and very deep information on the topic, as well as teaching me how to speak in public, which I couldn't do. I'd managed to evade that all the way through law school. But so that pulled me into automated litigation support, early 90s. E-discovery started to crop up. I got pulled into that. And my first experience with e-discovery, we were plaintiff side on a lawsuit. We had no business being plaintiffs. I was sent down to, I think it was either St. Louis or Kansas City, I forget, with the instruction to depose the IT director of the defendant company and learn everything there was to know about their electronic files. It was, bar none, the worst deposition I took in my entire career. I went down there, I learned nothing. And that's how I got started in electronic discovery. There's a long answer to a short question.
So, okay, so you've got now the technology background, you've got the legal side that you're now practicing for a couple of years, and eventually you decide you're leaving the law firm life, right?
I practiced 16 years before deciding it was time to leave. Yeah.
Okay, and then from there, you did you go straight to consultant? Did like
Yeah, so I had been a partner at a law firm. I essentially, in my second to last year-end partner evaluation with the head of the firm, they said, we're not happy because you're spending all your time doing this e-discovery stuff, and
and that doesn't matter, right?
That doesn't matter.
There's no future in that, right?
So we need you to be a real lawyer. Did I say somewhere I don't follow directions well?
Well,
I didn't follow directions well. I didn't become a real lawyer in that year. I kept focusing on the e-discovery stuff. And at my final partner evaluation, I don't know what the head of the firm had in mind, but I came in already knowing what I wanted to say, which was, before we talk about what you're thinking about, we agreed last year you were going to make suggestions for what I could do that would work out. You made no suggestions. I made a bunch of suggestions. You vetoed all of them. So it's time for me to go. So I had no clients. I had no business. I had nothing. We were a single income family at that point because we had 3 young kids. And I started a consulting practice. Now, I had good reason to think that I was going to have a regular flow of work coming in, and I did. I did not take a hit at all as a result of that transition. Because work did start coming in. At that time, there were almost no e-discovery consultants out there. I don't think there was a single law firm with an e-discovery attorney, not with that designation.
Right.
There were a
Yeah.
few people like Martha Dawson over at that time, Preston
sure.
Gates,
Yeah.
who were actively involved, but very few.
Yeah.
And she was still a practicing lawyer who was doing e-discovery. She wasn't an e-discovery
E-discovery
lawyer.
attorney, right?
Yeah. So, it was a bit of a gamble, but I'd been doing e-discovery for a decade at that point or more, somewhere between 10 and 13 years. I knew what I was doing and felt fairly confident that I could make a go of it, and did.
Okay.
So that's
it worked out.
off the edge of the cliff, and
Yeah.
didn't kill myself.
Right. So, okay. So now you're out there, you're starting to consult, you've got some clients. And within a couple of years, this EDRM thing blossomed.
Well, something led,
right.
there was
so that's what I was going to say.
There
What's
was,
the
if you will,
path into EDRM?
there was a condition precedent, if you will. One of the first major clients I got, Tom, you would remember the Glasser Legal Works series
sure.
we did.
Sure.
The first big e-discovery conference.
Yeah.
And I was one of the speakers the first year. I was the co-chair for the next 9 years. I think we ran it 10 years. Eventually, I brought on Browning as co-chair, and we were co-chair for, I don't know, maybe 5 of the years. I forget, co-chairs maybe 5 of the years. But one of the early conferences in 2003, at lunch, I sat down at a table, and someone else at the table said, "You're on your own now." I'll abbreviate the discussion because it wasn't just at that lunch, but it was basically, we want to do a survey of the market. Can you handle that? And I could kind of handle it, but there's some things I didn't know how to do or hadn't done. So they asked, can you find someone to help? I had no idea where to turn for assistance. So I called up Jim. And he put me in touch with Tom Geldman, who was in the same town as me. Jim was in Baltimore, or in Maryland, rather.
In Maryland.
Rural Maryland. And he knew Tom somehow. I forget. Jim knew everybody in those days.
Right.
He knew Tom. Tom had recently been let go as IT director at Dorsey and was consulting on his own. So I got put in touch with him. I contacted Tom and said, "Tom, have I got a deal for you? I need to do a survey. They don't think I have all the skills I need. I think you can fill the gap. They're paying me almost nothing, so I can pay you even less."
Perfect.
We've got a very short time deadline here, time frame. It's too short. We can't get the work done in that time frame. And they have expectations we can't meet because they're too great. So, Tom, are you in or not?
Right.
Do this with me?
Sounds like a sweet deal.
Actually, no. So I'm getting a Jim had introduced Tom to me years before that when I was at the first law firm. That's why the technology works, because we had lost our IT director at that firm. I was told to take over the IT department. I had no idea how to run an IT department. Tom had just been let go at Dorsey. Jim recommended Tom to me. I brought Tom in on a half-time basis to help for a year. And that's when we got to know each other. So when then I was asked to do the survey, I called up Tom and said, that's why I said, Tom, that's why he would say yes, because we'd worked together.
Because you'd already, right.
Yeah. And so Tom said, yes, we did the survey as a one-time thing. But then got from the organization, they said it was okay if we did a public report as well. Monica Bay over at Legal Technology News at the time ran that report as the main article in the August issue of 2003 August 2003 LTN, and that got the ball rolling. Tom and I decided to keep doing the survey on our own. We did it for about 6 years. We kept hearing, as we surveyed folks at law firms, at legal departments, and at service and software providers. And we kept hearing, especially from the providers, some variation of, you guys don't know what e-discovery is. And I kept thinking, well, I've been doing this for a while. I think I know what it is. But they would say things like, e-discovery, it's what we do. So
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
processed data, that was e-discovery. If they hosted data, that was e-discovery. If they provided reviewers, we called them coders at the time or whatever, but that was what e-discovery.
So nothing to do with discovery. It was the E side of it.
Yeah. And it was all the E side of it. And we looked at each other and said, well, they cannot possibly all be right. This does not work. There's a lot of confusion. Let's start a 1-year initiative to see if we can get a common definition of what constitutes e-discovery and something that talks about the basic steps most people engage in as they do this. We pulled together a group of about 30 people who showed up in mid-May in 2005 or 2005. And the chamber of at a meeting place in downtown St. Paul. And they basically said, okay, we're here now, what are we doing? In anticipation of a question like that, Tom and I had talked about what is it that we want to do anyway?
Right.
And one of the things we wanted was to put together a reference model. Tom's background was in IT. He'd used a number of different reference models, and we wanted it to be about electronic discovery, hence the electronic discovery reference model. I thought it would be very useful if we developed something visual as a guide to people, something that would fit on a single slide. And I had something that I'd been working on for years for no special purpose. I had, while I was still practicing law, started to build out this massive PowerPoint that detailed every single step I took. And as I went through the e-discovery process on the matters I worked on, it was this huge, cumbersome PowerPoint. And then I started paring it back and paring it back. I had no particular reason to do this. I just did it. And I had, by that point, boiled it down to a single slide. I put that up on the screen at the meeting, not because I thought we should use it. That was not my intention at all. Rather, it was to illustrate the point that I wanted something on a single slide. And gotta let the dog out the door. There, after that pause, put it up on the screen.
Dramatic pause.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And the folks.
What was on the slide? What was on the slide?
Yeah.
You left everybody hanging.
All this stuff on the bottom, get rid of that. That box that's higher up on the left, drop that down. The box that's lower down on the right, raise that up, and our work is done.
Okay.
And that's basically the EDRM diagram you see today. It looks a lot better, but fundamentally it hasn't changed.
Right.
And that diagram has stood the test of time. I think the primary reason it has stood the test of time is because it was so thoroughly grounded in those, whatever it was by that point, 13 years or whatever of e-discovery practice. So that it wasn't aspirational so much as it was descriptive.
Practical.
Practical. Here's the stuff that I and many others were doing. It's not like I had some special way of approaching e-discovery. I just happened to be the first person to document it in a way that other people found useful.
It also left enough room for interpretation, meaning it wasn't trying to be so specific, saying this is exactly what you need to do at this step, but rather it's there are activities that can take place here, which is what a good reference model should do.
Yep.
So yeah, that I think has helped it to survive, and I mean I think especially for non-attorneys who are trying to understand this. I mean, it's obviously very helpful to attorneys as well, but for non-attorneys as a basic guide to what the heck is this e-discovery stuff all about? You know, technologists, programmers, you know, even
judges,
judges. Absolutely.
It
just really helps.
Hiding behind the green screen of
yeah.
it's downstairs.
The first prototype.
No,
It's
it's
like-
not the first prototype. I
Oh,
can't see it
I thought you were
here.
gonna be like the Wright brothers and pull the first prototype off.
Yeah, there's no napkin out there. It was done on PowerPoint, just not the same. So I'm
No.
trying to remember the guy. There's a professor at Yale whose name I'm just not remembering right now, who has written probably by now a half dozen books on the visual presentation of quantitative information.
Okay.
And one of his core theses is that in any visual presentation, you should never put in anything more than what is essential to that presentation. Anything not useful, anything that's not there for a purpose, get rid of it. That notion was one of the ideas I had in mind as I was refining all of this. And this is an after the fact thing, a few years back, I heard a program, I forget which it was, on National Public Radio. And they were talking about maps. And what makes a map? The single most defining feature of a map is what it does not contain. They used what is probably the most famous and one of the best maps ever, which is the London Underground map, as an example. If you look at that map, London's not on that map. You don't see any buildings, you don't see any highways, you don't see roads, you don't see museums, you don't see any of that. The stuff that's on the map is out of scale. The distances are all wrong. The locations aren't even necessarily right, but it's a great tool for navigating the underground system. Had they put all those things in, it would no longer have been a map. It would have been a photograph, and good luck using a photograph to navigate the underground in London. It's not going to work. So it's the same type of principle with something like the EDRM diagram. It's as important for what's not there as for what is there. It doesn't try to describe the life cycle of a lawsuit. It doesn't try to describe what you need to do to meet the requirements or guidance of the federal rules of civil procedure or anyone's legal
Right. How
system.
to structure your interrogatories.
None of that. None of that is in there, because if it were, that would get in the way of what is there.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So were you surprised when it took off in the way that it did? I mean,
Yeah, we thought
But
this was
what-
going to be a 1 year begun and done project. We were hoping anybody might have paid attention to what we did,
right.
but we had no idea that it would pick up. I think it was a classic example of the right thing at the right time. Had we done this 2 years earlier, probably nobody would have paid attention. Had we tried to do it 2 years later, probably someone else would have come up with something come along with something in the meantime. So
Yeah,
there was a
so
need. We have
perfect
to be in the
timing.
right place, right time.
That's awesome.
And had I gone out and said to the world, here, I have a diagram, I don't think anyone would have paid attention. It was important that we had that base of support. We had probably, I don't remember, 15 to 20 organizations that all signed on to this initiative before anything went public. That way, when we published the diagram and its contents on January 1st of 2006, it wasn't something coming from Tom and me or me. It was something coming from a group of people who came from law firms, who came from corporate legal departments, who came from service and software providers, who'd all come together and given it all their stamp of approval and put their names on it publicly as well. Without that base of support from the beginning, I doubt anybody would have given it any attention, because they would have said, here's just a guy trying to make a name for himself. He's probably got his own interest at heart and nothing else. So let's ignore him and move on.
Right. Which unfortunately, that's such a common refrain within the industry. I mean, you know, and I think we end up losing a lot just because people, you know, there are plenty of people with good ideas, with good thoughts and concepts that we end up losing from that lack of standardization, that lack of cooperation, especially on the vendor side, but on the law firm side as well. I mean, I think corporations are more willing to come together and say, yeah, we're going to do something for the good of whatever it is.
Right.
And it's interesting that I'm looking at the last half hour of discussion and saying, how much of this is actually from your Peace Corps time? Meaning, that idea of
from Peace Corps,
service.
it's from before that. Even in high school, we did a senior project. And my senior project, most people did individual projects. There was a group of 5 of us who got together and did a collaborative senior project. The school I went to was 85% boarding, 15% day. I was one of the day students. If you're a boarding student, you live on campus. You don't get off campus much. We put together a program that had 2 components. One was sort of an onboarding, if you will, program for new students to help them get to know each other better. And the other was a program for outdoor activities so they could get off campus and outdoors. The latter part was called Woods, or Wayland Out of Door Society. Both components continue on today, even these many years later. But that too was a collaborative effort undertaken for the good of the community.
Yeah.
So I can trace all that back to the high school I went to as well.
That's awesome. So before we run out of time, let's jump ahead to modern days. Yeah.
Right.
So you've done a bunch of stuff in between 2005 and now, and unfortunately we don't have 3 hours to really dig in, although I'd love to.
And then people are less interested in most of those things than worrying about where EDRM came from, frankly. Yeah.
Well, but also, I mean, it's important to see that there's a lot of opportunities that exist within the industry and within people can do all kinds of stuff and can reinvent themselves, can figure out new ways to apply themselves.
I've been a testifying expert witness. I started up several companies that went nowhere, as well as EDRM that did. I had my own consulting practice for many of those years. Spent 4 years at a large consulting firm, and now I am at a major e-discovery technology company, a software company, Reveal. Yeah.
So what? I mean, we joked about it at the beginning of the chat, but what actually are you doing at Reveal? What does
so I've got a
title, but what does your day look like?
I've got a thankfully ambiguous title, but what my day looks like is a combination of things that keeps changing, and I think I'm constitutionally incapable of just working on one thing. I've never been able to stick to that. I probably never will be able to, and I don't have to stick to that here. A major part of my role is the brand awareness side, and really a lot of that is educating the market about the technology that Reveal has and what you are capable of doing with that technology, so that I write quite a number of blog posts on that. And I've been trying to focus on features in the technology that you might not find elsewhere, and what you can do with those features as a practicing lawyer in particular, because that's what my background is, to help you with your practice. That's by no means the only thing I do with those posts, but that's one of the major things. Each Friday morning, I do a half-hour live interview, eDiscovery Leaders Live. That's live and recorded and available on the website. And it's akin to this, very little prep ahead of time, except we just stick to half an hour.
What do you mean? We prepped for hours before this.
That's what I said, very little prep.
Yeah.
It's not like being prepped to be an expert witness. But it's really whatever topics are of interest to the people who are showing up. And it's a variety of people. So this week, it's going to be someone from Brazil, for example. Next week, it's going to be someone from British Columbia. It's been people from around the United States and a whole variety of things. I think I've done about 60 or so of those by now. Conferences and all the usual stuff there. internally, one of the things I do is that I am part of the project. I'm part of the people who think about the project, the software, the platform roadmap. Where should the technology go? What should we try to make it capable of accomplishing as we move forward in the future? What capabilities do we think people might want? What capabilities do we think we can give to them that they aren't even envisioning? So that's a very rewarding part of the role for me and part of what I was looking for in the job. Then, of course, I help support the sales team. I help support the onboarding team, and I help support the customer success team, bringing to bear that time as a practicing lawyer, that time as an expert witness, that time as a consultant.
Yeah, awesome. So you're having fun?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's great. I have landed in for me, just a wonderful situation.
Good.
That's awesome.
Good, good.
Yeah. So, Tom, I think unless you've got any other questions before we
and by the way,
yeah,
one of the reasons I ended up here is you said at the very beginning, I took that time to talk with you when I didn't know who you were before you rocketed to fame and fortune.
I don't know about that, but
and, well, one of the people I also took time to talk with way back when was Wendell Giza, who is the CEO of Reveal. So when I was I've had 3 times in my career where I've stepped back from anywhere 3 to 6 months to say, okay, what next? And this was one of them, and interviewed a whole bunch of people, kind of like when I was thinking about law school, to try to figure out what to do next, as well as to try to probe about possibilities. And when I contacted Wendell, he said, well, one of the reasons I'm even talking with you now is because you took the time to talk with me then. So, that what goes around comes around.
That's awesome. A little bit of good karma.
Yeah, good karma.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, Tom?
All right. Here we go. I'm thinking that
is this going to go a Tom way or a Rocky way? What do you think on this one?
I think we need 2 offensive tackles, a kicker, and a running back.
Man, yes. I'm in trouble now.
Yeah. So, George, penultimate question, real quick. This is sort of off the top of your head. Beatles or Stones?
Beatles.
Success.
I'm telling you, I don't get no respect.
I know it.
Tough crowd.
It's maybe the narrowness of my growing up on a gravel road in rural Wisconsin. I don't know.
Well, I don't think so, because their appeal is clearly universal. All the people who we've interviewed over the years, only 2, other than myself, have said the Rolling Stones. So we cross a wide spectrum.
I think we have 3 now. I think we're up to 3. So yeah.
Well, 3 counting me, right?
Counting you, of course. Yes.
Yeah, 3 counting me. Yeah. So
our kids, when they were young, I think all 3 liked the Beatles. So there you go. I mean, I could only make one answer.
There you go.
Yeah. Good. So the final question, one we mentioned earlier, and we ask everybody at the end, if you could spend a day with anybody from our profession who you've met, and it can be somebody alive or deceased, or somebody you didn't meet who came along, although with your longevity in the field, it's hard to believe there's anybody in our field you haven't met would be worth spending a day with. But if there were someone, who would that person be, and what would you do with them?
So I would pick a late summer day, and I would be able to control the conditions ahead of time. So it would be a beautiful late summer day, just hot enough that some alcoholic beverages would go down well. We would be in our backyard here, because many people who know me know that I, about a decade ago, built a pizza oven in our backyard.
Yep.
So we would be here for the full day. They'd be hanging out with. It takes 3 hours to prep to get that oven to heat. They'd be with me the whole time, and I'd have 2 people who I think never met each other. But it would be our good old friend, Jim Kane, who passed away a number of years ago. And then our other good old friend, Browning Marian.
Wow, you think they never met? That's a
I
great.
don't think I think Browning kind of knew who Jim was, but
I
not
think they
really.
knew who each other were, but yeah, that's an
Yeah.
interesting thing. I can't.
Yeah.
I don't have
think
a
they ever
recollection
met.
of seeing them together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think they would have had, I don't think they ever met. I think they would have gotten along famously.
Oh, that would have been
Absolutely. And
I'd pay to be a fly on the wall for that
day.
day in your backyard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a great discussion that would be. Two, really
And-
imaginative. Yeah.
And to be able to feed them up pizza from my oven,
Yeah.
and keep them well
Yeah.
lubricated, it would make for a phenomenal day.
And two people well versed in the use of, shall we say, not politically correct vocabulary.
And as Jim was quick to say, he kissed the Blarney Stone at least once.
That's right. Yeah, I'm sure it was more than once.
Yeah.
That's a great choice. That's.
Yeah.
I mean, that just my mind is rolling thinking about the discussion, and because it wouldn't just be about what we do and about our.
Oh, no, it would have ranged far and wide.
Right. They had such a wide range of interests that the
And
discussion.
neither one of them would have been bashful about expressing their.
No,
views.
no.
Right.
Not in the least. Well, that's great. That would be a great. I'm still pondering what that discussion would be like. Wonderful to see. Well, George, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate you taking the time. I look forward to hopefully seeing you again in person. It's been close to 2 years since we've seen
I
each other
know.
face to face. Yeah.
Fingers crossed, legal week.
Yeah. Like I said, I've already made a reservation, and Rocky and I have already booked out the cigar smoking time. So we're on track.
We're all set then, we hope.
Yep. But as always, as things have happened in the last 2 years, there may be events that beyond our control that change that. But I hope.
Yeah.
Some of the early reports we're getting. I know Rocky's always ahead of us because
Right.
they're on top of things in Tel Aviv. We're getting early reports that although it's more communicable,
Contagious, right? But
it doesn't seem to be as strong, if you will. It doesn't have as heavy a set of symptoms.
That's the hope, but we're
Still too early.
But yeah, everyone here is basically saying,
Yeah.
let's wait and actually see, not jump to conclusions. So
Yeah.
But we can always hope that it's just
There was an early, very limited set of statistics that came out of South Africa that held that. But
Right.
a narrow data set that
I think we're up to 7 confirmed cases here, or something like that. So
We're
they're keeping them pretty well locked down. In terms of,
fortunately, we're more than that over here. And in fact, we had a cruise ship pulled in here in New Orleans the other day that had 17 or 20 confirmed cases, and they're not sure which variant it is. They're trying to figure that out now, but which means it's been here for several months.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're such a wide open society here, and people travel so much that, especially at this time of the year, it's all over the place. So
that's why we've been they locked the border down to non-citizens already for almost 2 weeks now, and so that's what's kept the number as low as it is. But I mean, they locked it down like as soon as they heard anything about it. So we'll see. We're just hoping that it's one of those that, like, yes, it exists, but let's keep moving on, and hopefully nothing else rears its ugly head in the next few months. But I'm really hopeful for.
I'll be looking forward. George, will you guys, if things go the way you plan, will you have a booth there?
We will have a booth.
All right.
We will be, if all goes as well, you will have a very hard time not seeing us.
Okay.
You will have to hide in a corner somewhere.
I take your point. Which will be great. That'll be great it'd be great to see you and talk and just get in a little more into depth on some of the stuff that's going on in the business.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Is of interest to us. So
and Tom
again,
and Rocky, thank you both very much for having me on as well.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure. Hope you and the family have a great Christmas and happy holidays to everybody at Reveal. And good luck with that 4-degree weather.
Hey, it's heated up to 8 degrees.
No, there we go. So I feel better already.
Yeah. you should.
Rocky, also happy holidays to you.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll look forward to seeing you in New York, hopefully, knock on wood.
We'll talk before then, I'm sure.
We'll be talking between now and then. Yeah, yeah. And to all our viewers, we wish everybody out there a happy holiday, whatever you celebrate. We hope it's peaceful and a fruitful new year for all of you.
Safe.
And a safe one. Yeah, please be safe. And we look forward to seeing you all someplace live down the road. So until next time, thanks and goodbye from the eDiscovery Channel.